I don't know a men or women's team that I can think of in an international competition under that kind of pressure where you need to get something out of the game that lasted 60 minutes, 2 players down. I can't think of a game. And we got to penalties and we lost in penalties. But I walk away going, probably our best job coaching that we've done with them, you know, and I'm feeling good. I tell you that only because at that time then, since we lost, then the press has turned on me. The Nigerian public has turned on me. Now the worst coach ever. I mean, like, I'm just getting obliterated in the media. And I always protected the federation. I never spoke out. There were a lot of things that went on, not to get into all of that with you now. I'm telling you that just to go how quickly things changed from probably being the most hated man in Nigeria to now all of a sudden it's completely changed at the World Cup. The media's now behind you. You got to keep this guy. He should be coaching our men's team because the men's teams didn't make the World Cup. You know, I might consider it. Yeah, I may consider it. Everything completely changed, and it was all from the work we did in the World Cup. So that's probably what I'm most proud of.
Welcome, Footy family, to the 2024 United Soccer Coaches Convention in Anaheim. We're here recording from Media Row in the Exhibitor Hall and are looking forward to another year of insightful discussions with some of the top football people in the world. And our first guest definitely fits that description. Joining us is Randy Waldrum, the current head coach for Pitt Women's Soccer, and recently led the Nigeria women's national team to the round of 16 in the 23 FIFA Women's World Cup. His impressive career also includes stints at Notre Dame, Trinidad and Tobago women's national team, Houston Dash in the NWSL, and much more. Coach, it's an honor to have you.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
So we have some connections. Our college coach is a good friend of yours, old Butch Lawfer.
Butch Lawfer, that's right.
The man.
Let's start there. Tell us about old Bucho growing up.
Butch owns Canyon, Texas, doesn't he? I mean,
he does.
He's the legend there. Butch and I grew up playing against each other as youth players. He's a little bit younger than I am, but, you know, we played against each other. So we've known each other, gosh, almost all of our lives, especially all of our coaching lives. And we got involved with U.S. Soccer, being instructors for the National Coaching School. So we've done many coaching courses where we taught together. And just a lifetime friendship. You know, we stay in touch regularly and check in on each other and see how they're doing. I think he's a great coach. I've learned a lot from him, and I hope he's learned a few things from me. And we worked in Trinidad together a little bit, a few times. And obviously he's done an amazing job at West Texas. And many people may not remember, but he actually did both of the programs when he started at West Texas. So he kind of built.
My freshman year, he was still the women's coach.
That's right. And he was successful with the women's side too, you know. And so he's been very successful at every level and one of the best coaches out there. So, it's great. I didn't realize that till I got here that you guys had played there for him. So it's a small world that we live in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's like the reoccurring thing with Butch going to these things that I've known is just he knows everybody. Everybody knows him.
Somehow, some way.
He's very connected. That's right.
But that's what these events are for. It's great to, you know, just come out here and network and connect with different people. And, you know, this is probably the only chance you get to, like, shake hands and rub shoulders with people from around the world and at different levels. And, you know, I would have the opportunity to sit down and talk to you, except for at a place like this. So, really awesome.
No question about it. I mean, there's thousands of people here, and ran across Niall Quinn walking down the hall today. I mean, like, I saw a group of coaches from Cameroon, you know, that are here. And I mean, coaches from all over the world are coming in. And like you said, it's a great place just to reconnect. And some of these people I don't get to see until the convention every year. So I look forward to that, just to get to see old friends. And, you know, the only thing about it is many years ago, you know, I would come to the convention and I'm one of the young coaches up and coming. And, you know, I looked up to so many different people, and it's all of a sudden I woke up one day and came to the convention. I said, I'm the old guy now. All these young, like you guys, all these young coaches now starting to make a name for themselves. And I'm the old guy. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And I know you have to say that because I paid you. So that's all right. Yeah.
Well, so last night you delivered a field session for all the attendees here. I had the pleasure of sitting down and watching that front and center, first row, you know, A student right here.
Good deal.
No, but I really wanted to just sit down and listen to that because it was a unique topic. Specifically, it was preparing for the group of death, building your defensive block. Right? So you essentially explained to us how you prepared for the tournament, training wise, and kind of the adjustments you made game to game, and how you're looking to spend your time leading up to the tournament. So, you mentioned that you only had 10 days to prepare, which is tough to deal with, but maybe not so uncommon, because a lot of international managers, you have to get in and try to implement something to get results, because arguably you have more pressure to get results at that level than the club level even. So I guess I just wanted to start by, you explaining to us how you kind of shaped your design for your training, those 10 days and how that looked and what went into that thought process.
Yeah, well, let me take a step back and just, for the coaches out there listening, the international coaching is so much different than club coaching, whether it's pro, college, whatever, because you have those players every day of every, the week.
Yeah.
And international coaching, you only get your players during an international break, a window, and you usually get 10 days at a time, and you're usually playing 2 games in those 10 days. So if you think about it, like for us, for example, when we go into a camp, then we may be in camp 10 days, but we may have 2 matches. So our players are coming from Europe, for example. So the first couple of days, you're just doing recovery training. They just got off a 16-hour flight, and so you can't really train. And now you've hopped into a game. The next day after the game's the recovery day again. So you really only get a couple of days out of the 10 to train and prepare. So it's a whole different animal, making use of your time and preparing kind of a game model and how you want to play, because you just don't have the training time that you have with a club. So having said that, I think honestly a little bit where my years of college coaching may have helped me at the World Cup is we were supposed to have a 5-week camp in Nigeria and then go for another 2 weeks in Australia. Well, it got canceled. A whole different story for a lot of reasons, but issues that we were having with the federation. They canceled the 5 weeks. So as you mentioned, we had 10 days. So we all went directly to Australia and met up there. And we had 10 days before we opened with Canada. So I think where the college part may have helped me is I said, well, you know what? It's a college preseason. Our college preseasons are only 10, 12 days.
2 weeks.
And it's kind of like, I just got to pick a couple of things that I think is going to be most important. So my mindset going in was, we were in the group of death. Canada was the defending Olympic gold medalist. Australia was the host nation. Ireland was, I think, first time debutantes in the tournament, but ranked 21st in the world. And I think we came in ranked like 42nd or 41st in the world. So honestly, with 10 days of preparation going into it, I felt like we're going to be hard pressed to win a game. Maybe we get something out of Ireland. I never would say that to my team, but obviously as a coach, you're realistic in knowing what you're up against. And so what I did is I picked 2 themes, really. I said, we're not going to have much of the ball because we don't have time to prepare our team offensively to build out and keep it and, our player movement. So I just said, we've got to be really good defensively. And so that's when I decided to implement this defensive block with them. And we just really drilled that over the 10 days. And then I said, the second thing is the only chances we're going to get are going to come off of counterattacks, not through build-up play. So those 2 themes I took through those 10 days. And I'll show it in my classroom session on Saturday, but you'll see the actual practices that we did. I threw in a day or 2 here or there of just some possession, because players don't want to spend 10 days defending, right? You want to play.
That was definitely a Butch staple at WT.
Yeah. So we had to do a little bit, to break the ice, a few days of some possessional things. But basically the theme for the 10 days was, transition, counterattacking, and defending. So that's kind of the mindset going into it. And we really didn't look at Australia and Ireland because I put everything into Canada. And the reason, my logic on it was, I said, going in my mind, I'm thinking it's highly unlikely. I think Canada were ranked 7th in the world. I think Australia was ranked 10th in the world, but they're the host nation. And I said, ideally, we're probably not going to get a result against Australia. We had played Canada the February before in 2 friendlies, and we had lost 2-0 and drew 2-2 with them in the second game. So I said, I think we can potentially get a result out of Ireland. So if we could get even a point out of Canada, even if we lost to Australia, if we could get 3 out of Ireland, and maybe 4
Still have
could
some
get us
wiggle room,
through.
yeah.
So that was kind of the mindset. So the 10 days, all the focus was on Canada, because if we didn't get a point out of Canada, it was like, you have to get something out of Australia and you have to get something out of Ireland. And we thought that was going to be difficult. So I didn't really talk about the other 2 teams in the group. We went in 10 days, focused on getting something out of Canada. And
you considered them the top team in the group?
I thought between them and Australia, I thought even though ranking Canada was higher, even though they were the gold medalists, Australia was really in good form. They had just come off of some friendlies where they had knocked off England, and they were just playing really well. I think they were at the time at home. I thought they were playing the better football at the time than Canada, but I knew Canada was really good, and I knew we weren't going to have the ball much. So the focus was on Canada, getting something out of Canada, and fortunately we got a point, out of it. Yeah.
Evan and I actually saw Canada play like pitch side against the U.S. women's in the Gold Cup final a few years ago, and we also watched the semifinal right before that. I think it was Jamaica and
Forgot who it was.
another Caribbean
Can't remember.
team, but
But we were
see the difference in the level.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Third place, not the semifinal.
Right.
Third place game to the final. Like,
Yeah.
night and day.
It is.
It was so fast.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, women's soccer is it's a good level.
And the speed of the game, especially at that level with the top teams, is very high.
Yeah.
It's not the men's game, but it's still very, very high.
For sure.
And it's probably surprised you, because if you don't really follow it all the time, you're amazed at those plays. Even being in a collegiate program at a good program and playing at a high level, it's still a big step up to the international level of those top teams.
And even in that Canada game that we watched, we noticed a couple players that were really good. I think one of them was Fleming.
Yeah.
Another one, and we looked up like, oh, where do they play at? Like what team? And like they're still like sophomores in college.
Yeah.
At the time.
Yeah. And of course, Fleming went on and played with Chelsea.
Yep.
And I mean,
she's
got a special team, and the hard part was we just, like I said, we knew we weren't going to have the ball much, so we had to be very good and clinical with our counters, but we had to hang on. And we kind of honestly we grew into the tournament, because if you watch the Canada game, as I showed in my presentation last night to the coaches, our line of confrontation to meet them was supposed to be at the top of the circle.
Right.
That's where we wanted to start our block. But right away in the game, that was at midfield. And then 5-10 minutes into the game, we were defending from the bottom of our circle. And it was just like we were hanging on. The first 20 minutes, they were all over us. And we were just kind of hanging on. And then we got a couple of counters where we got a decent look. And we had one counter. We had great counter and some good combination play at the top of the box. Hit a shot that the keeper has to make a really good save on. And you start to, and you guys have known that, you've been in games where you kind of probably weren't the team expected to win or the best team, but you kind of grew into it. And that's what we did with Canada. As the minutes went by, we just grew more and more into the game. And, we got into the second half, and many people may remember, but 5 or 6 minutes, I believe, into the second half, we fouled Sinclair in the box. So they got a penalty. And I'm thinking, as a coach on the sideline, I'm thinking, we've played 50 minutes so well defensively and not conceded any really, really good looks. And now we're going to give away a penalty. And in your mind, you're thinking it's going to be hard to get back, because we just didn't create enough chances offensively. And of course, our keeper, Chamaka Ndozi, made a big save on Sinclair.
Yep.
And then it was almost instantaneously. You saw it
just lifts everybody.
It lifted everybody. And, fortunately we finished the game out and, didn't get 3, but we got the point, which was absolutely crucial for us.
So that was Canada, you said?
That was Canada.
That was game 1.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's kind of just set that up real quick. So you talked about last night your main ideas, your main principles that you wanted to see from the team.
Yeah.
And not anything too complex or nothing that most coaches haven't heard before.
Right.
You want them to be super compact. You said meet them at a certain line, allow anything sideways behind that line.
Yeah.
And wait to engage them once they cross the line.
Right.
Any back pass, step up, push the lines, and when the ball goes wide, to show them to the touchline.
Yeah.
Basic principles defensively.
Right.
But just wanted them to be super patient and organized in the way that they defended together.
Yeah.
And then once they got the ball, to counter quickly, to get behind. You mentioned you wanted to see like a almost a 6-second rule where, you're getting behind within 6 seconds. If you lost the ball in that transition moment, to continue to press in that moment. And you said when you attack, to attack hard. Right. So you have these ideas, the ways that you want to play, but obviously the game presents different situations and different problems. Yeah. And I think, definitely not so much at the international level. Managers are a lot more savvy, but kind of like getting up to that level, I think a lot of times managers really struggle to make adjustments. Right. And so you talked about game to game, like the adjustments that you made. Right. Particularly in that first game against Canada, you said you noticed that the 2-6s would drop down to the line of confrontation. Right. And just to see how your midfielders would deal with it. Yeah. So why don't you talk about that a little bit? Yeah, so in our block structure, we were playing out of a 4-3-3. So we basically kept our 3 forwards at the line of the confrontation, and we told them to play within the width of the penalty box, so they're nice and tight and kind of concede a little bit of space on the flanks. Yeah. And almost entice them to play wide and then try to trap the ball there, with our wingers. And our 3 midfield players then would sit in midfield, and we wanted our 2 attacking mids to deal with their 2 holding midfielders, because we had noticed in all of our analysis, everything Canada did offensively, their play was set by their 4 backs and the 2 holding midfield players. So about 85% of the way they played went through those 2 holding midfield players, just in moving the ball side to side and playing in, playing back, now to get forward, that kind of thing. So we knew we had to take them out of the game. And in the structure where you have your front 3 and then you have your back 4 and your midfield 3 kind of in the middle of the block dealing with their midfielders, as the game went on and their midfield couldn't get the ball the way they wanted it with the time they wanted, they did a couple of different things. And one of those was those 2 midfield players drop back in front of our forwards in the line of confrontation. So we had to make sure our midfielders understood, don't sit in as the 3 and not really have a player to deal with, for our 2 attacking mids to go ahead and move up to the line of confrontation. So now in essence, we had 5 across instead of 3. And then if their 2 holding wanted to go back closer to the center backs to get the ball, we were okay with that because it was still in front of us, right? We were okay with them having the ball in front. But we wanted our 2 attacking mids on that front line. That line was still at the top of the center circle.
Still at the top of the center circle, yeah. So then we had just 1 holding mid. So the thing we had to talk about at halftime was because again, we didn't have so much time to work on this, right? So then what was happening is Fleming, who you mentioned earlier, would drift out kind of wide away from their 9. Sinclair was playing in the 9, so she was the attacking mid in front of their 2 holding. So she would not stay central. She started to drift out wide to the outside backs. So at halftime, we kind of had to adjust and get our center backs to understand if our holding mid could slide to that side, if the ball was coming out her side, she could slide over and deal with her. But if the ball was on the opposite side and Fleming went wide, then there was no way the center midfield player was going to get across. So our center back had to step into that space, right? So we had to talk about how to deal with that player so she wouldn't get it free. Because when you do play a tight defensive block, the objective is not to give them much space between the lines. You want everything tight. So if they do play in the block, you can kind of collapse and press the ball.
And if she's pulling wide and the 2-6s are dropping down, they're trying to open up that lane to play straight into the 9.
Exactly.
How did you
we would have one center back would step on. So if the 9 dropped off the back line and into midfield, we'd have a center back step, right? And then the thing we emphasize is anytime the ball got played in the middle of the block, that forwards as well as midfielders, if they played behind you, had to turn and press the ball.
Immediately.
So even, for example, if that 9 dropped off, in the midfield to get it, and a center back stepped, then we still needed the midfielder in front to turn and double back. So you're always trying to double the ball inside that block.
Just make it difficult even if she does get the ball.
And you know what, this is different, and I'm glad you brought that up because it's quite different than, for example, in the college game. In my experience in 30 plus years, now again, I'm been mostly on the women's side, and so maybe a little bit different than the men's game, but most coaches have a formation and a style and game plan, for lack of a better word. But no matter what's going on in the game, they just stay with that.
Yeah.
Like,
The only adjustment they make
don't
is
see
just a sub.
That's it. Yeah. Just do subs. You don't see many tactical,
Yeah.
hey, I'll move this player 5 yards inside, or I'll play this player a little higher.
Play off of this shoulder, you know.
They don't.
Cut this passing lane.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't see that much. And so getting our players to understand and recognize these moments. Now, the good thing is a lot of our players at Nigeria, our top players are playing in Europe for decent clubs.
Yeah.
So they have a fairly good background. Our Nigerians that come from Nigeria in the leagues there are very naive because the coaching's not as good and the organization's not as good. So the hard part, even with Canada, and if I'm being honest, we got away with it a few times where we dodged some bullets, but we were still at times getting caught. For example, if the ball came out their right side, our left side, you know, and we shift everything over in the block. Sometimes our right back would squeeze too far in instead of passing her on to the center back, and they would slip their outside back into that space. And a lot of times they got the ball in that wide area with unmarked. And we were just fortunate we could deal with the cross or whatever. But it just wasn't enough time, you know, to iron out all the kinks in it. And so, but I thought overall, when you look at the big picture of it, considering it, the girls really did a great job.
So you came out with a draw in that game.
Yep.
That's positive.
Yeah.
Against a team like Canada in the first game.
Exactly.
You need a point.
No, definite. And the fact that they were the defending gold medalists and all those things is like, hey, our players needed to know and have confidence that we can play with anybody, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yep. I think the concept of turning to double down on the ball from the midfield is, when you said that last night, you know, that it registered to me because that's something that I coach a lot. And for, you know, players that I coach, a good level, but, you know, they're younger kids. They're, you know, in their high school ages. That's a concept they've never heard. Really, I've never heard it coached either.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this to me is a situation where you can press very effectively, you know, and that's not often talked about as an actual pressing trigger.
Right.
You know, when your line gets broken, just immediately turning and doubling down behind you.
Exactly.
You know? But and I guess I wanted to ask, like, did you see success in those situations during that game?
I think we saw it at times, you know, and like I said, there were times we got a little bit lucky because we didn't do it right and they broke us, you know, in a press. Because no matter how you structure yourself defensively, whether you're playing in a block or you just drop deep and, you know, play at the top of the 18 and then try to hold teams out, good teams will always break you down. There's going to be opportunity. Something's going to happen. But I thought overall, for the most part, considering the few days we had to prepare for them, I thought we did a decent job, and we got better at it as the tournament went on.
Yeah, you really have to make sure the line, like the lines between the space between the horizontal lines are very compact, right? Because if you're too stretched, it's hard to get back.
Well, and not to interrupt you, but I had a couple of coaches stayed after the session and asked me the question, and one was really concerned because I said, the distance between the back line and the front line is 24 yards.
Right.
It's very tight in there. And they're like, aren't you concerned?
Worried about it.
That, you know, that they can play over. You said, well, number one, you've got a goalkeeper that's going to play off their line now to help deal with some of that space behind. And if you drop your line a little bit lower, then there's not as much space behind. Because in football, defensively, that's what you're trying to do is protect the space behind you, right? They can't hurt you in front of you, but it's all about space, right? So, and I said that, and they go, well, you know, they were worried. And they said, well, what about just dropping your back line a little bit deeper and increasing that gap? I said, if you do that, now you're opening up the space between your front line and your back, and now they're going to play through midfield, and you'll never get the ball, right? So we congest the area, and when we congest the area, we know they can't play through that area. Now we know the only way to break us is to play behind. So now it's just teaching your players how to drop and read long service and being prepared for that. So, and she was like, oh, I never thought about that, you know?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you hope that your defenders can win a foot race.
Exactly.
You got to be ready for the race.
Exactly. And if you're reading service, even if you have a player that's not quite as fast, but if their mental speed is fast, you know, their soccer
positioning
good,
and everything,
then they can get to those balls. Yeah.
Usually they're going to have a slight advantage in that race anyway.
Yep.
Well, good. Okay, so then second game was Australia, and that was the
Matildas.
two biggest games.
It was huge. I really went into it, and I felt really good coming off the game. The girls felt great getting
What was
that result.
sorry to interrupt. What was Australia's result in their first game?
Australia had beaten Ireland. Trying to remember the
I can't remember if it
score.
was comfortably or not.
Yeah, I can't remember what the score. I'm sorry, I can't remember the score. But yeah, they had beaten Ireland. I think it maybe only been by a goal or so. I think it was relatively close.
They were top of the group.
I know they only beat Canada 2-1. Australia did, but Canada only beat Ireland 2-1. But I can't remember that score.
Yeah.
But so we knew going in. The difference of the two teams was Canada was more build up, possession based, use their abilities to break you down by their game model, their possession football. Australia was a little bit more direct. They might swing the ball around the back a little bit, but they're swinging it to move you so they can play direct behind you. They played out a more traditional 4-4-2. So they would push in attack. They pushed their two outside backs into midfield and their two wide midfielders up front. So it's almost like a 2-4-4 against you. And then they would just knock long balls because their outside mids were really fast. And I was very concerned about that. Then we also didn't know if Sam Kerr had picked up an injury. So we didn't know if she was going to play or not because it was kind of like they may hold her out, they may not. She may be able to play. But even Caitlin Ford up front had a lot of pace. So we're really worried about their pace and being able to exploit us, especially, if the game got too open. So what we decided to do going into that game, now again, mind you, as coaches, I think we always, behind the scenes, we're realistic and we know what we have and we know what we're playing. So that's when we come up with our game plan. In front of the players, it's always, we can get a result. We can win. And you keep building their belief. And the players really almost felt like a win after the 1-1 result, the 0-0 result with Canada, right? So they were in a really good place mentally. And so we just tried to build on that mentally with them. But what we decided to do is say, let's just tweak the block a little bit. So instead of 3 up front in the block, let's designate one attacking mid as you're always going to be up front with the 9. So we played 4 across the front.
Okay.
And then since they had 2 holding mids, then it gave us 2 holding mids to set in the midfield of the block. So our block then became almost like a 4-2-4 block.
Okay,
so
gotcha. Yeah.
So we just pretty much had them matched up.
So is that something that you determined based on film analysis prior to the game or adjustments during the game?
No, we did this before. All of our match analysis before.
So you didn't anticipate them coming out any differently?
We didn't. We thought like every game, like I said, they just come off prior to the World Cup, coming off some big wins against England. They were rolling. Said they're not going to change for us. There was no need to. So, and they'd already gotten a win, I think, and in the first match. So it was one of those that we said that we tweaked the block just a little bit. And even though the block is still zonal in the block, it formation-wise, it matches up to their formation a little bit better. And then what we said is, since we don't want them getting behind us, let's drop the block deeper. So instead of top of the circle, our line of confrontation started at midfield.
Yeah.
And we just said anything in their half when they clearly have it, just let them have it. Let them bring it. And now we killed more space behind us that they really couldn't play over the top as well. And so that was the mindset going into it and the tactical plan that we had. And it really didn't alter too much. There weren't too many things that happened in the game that you said, oh, we gotta tweak this or we gotta to make this adjustment. I do think at times
kind of played out how you expected it.
It did. And I think what happened though, what didn't play out the way I expected is we had a little bit more of the ball than I expected. And we created more chances than I expected. So the game at times got a little bit more open than I wanted it to get because
made you nervous.
It made me nervous, so we got more adventurous. But what had happened in that match is, every game I think has tipping points, key moments in it, and we see it in every sport. Like a football team, American football team's getting dominated and
turnover,
and all of a sudden there's a turnover and now the momentum changes, right?
Yep.
Well, the same in our football. I think there's key moments that changes things, and the key moment for us against Canada was saving the penalty kick against Sinclair. Then we were much better the last half hour of the game, right? And so in this game, what had happened is we had played really well We're really secured defensively. And this is where coaches have to understand details matter. But we had a goal kick, our goal kick. And again, mind you, like I said, we didn't have time to teach our team how to build out and keep it and play the way Pep plays or whatever, battle in the back. So we just came in with the idea every goal kick, we're just going to hit it long, right? Squeeze our team over to one side, play into that block and try to win it and pick up a second ball. Don't mess about, right? We didn't want to give them an opportunity. And what happened when we did it on the goal kick, about 5 minutes before the end of the game, we had a goal kick and our right back stepped too high up in that block. When we'd squeezed over to one side of the field, we hit it to that side, but she had stepped too high up. They won the first header, and it goes behind her into the winger that got behind. They got in, they got across, and now they score a goal. So with about 5 minutes left, and it was like, it's so devastating 5 minutes before the end of the half. They say those are the most dangerous times, 5 minutes before and 5 minutes after halftime. And I'm thinking, we've been so good and even created good chances. We've played so well. Now here we go. We get up a goal, right? And but as fate would have it, they had a goal kick and added time.
Yep.
In the half, we win the first ball. We win the second ball. We pick it up, play wide, and get a cross in. And Uchenna Kanu scores a game-tying goal. So that changed everything going into halftime. Because now we didn't concede late, and now you're down one and you're deflated. Now all of a sudden it's we're rocking.
You score, you're on a high.
Yeah, we're on a high, and we came back. We responded the way you want to respond, and then, guys, I don't even know how to explain it. But the second half, we were just very clinical. We got more of the game. We ended up getting a goal off a corner kick, a set piece. So now all of a sudden we go up 2-1, and then I think it was within 4 or 5 minutes, somewhere from our second goal, we get a great third goal from Ashwola. And now all of a sudden, I'm looking at my assistant coach.
So what are we doing here?
And I'm going, there's 18 minutes left in the game. And I go, Kyle, the hell are we up 3-1, in this game? And we're winning. Now it's like, we can win this. We can ride this out. And we did. We got through the final, into 90 minutes, and they added 11 minutes of extra time. I can tell you the 11 minutes felt like another 45-minute half, and they were just bombarding us and throwing everything forward. So we did make a few changes with some defensive players trying to get a little bit more defensive, taking a forward off and getting another back in. And we finished out playing with 5 backs and, only one up front, and because we didn't need the goal, we had a 2-goal lead. Yeah. And luckily, I will say this, luckily of the 11 minutes of added time, they did score a second goal, but they scored it in the 10th minute of the 11th. And I'm almost fearful sitting here today, if they would have scored the first minute or two with the 11 minutes, they may have been a different story. Because they would come, they battered us the last 11 minutes, and we hung on and, got out of there with the win. So now everything's changed because we have a chance to win the group now, right? Now we're in the driver's seat. We're top of the group after the second game.
At this point, you got 4 points out of 6 in your 2 hardest games.
That's right. That's right.
So you're going into the third game. It's against Ireland,
right?
Which tell us about them. I don't know much about.
Yeah, well, they got a couple of really special players. They've got a girl that, ironically, I drafted when I was at the Houston Dash, a player named Denise O'Sullivan.
Okay.
And she played with the Dash.
Is she Florida State?
No. She's an Irish kid, and we brought her over from Ireland. She played with us for 4 or 5 years, and then she was traded. She plays for the Courage now in North Carolina. But she was a really good, crafty little midfield player. Then they had a girl named Sarah McCabe that's kind of a wide player for them, and she was their everything. She's an Arsenal player. So we really worried about those 2 players, but we kind of thought the rest of the players were just a good team, a solid team. But that was kind of their two stars. But the thing we had to be careful of is we were at the top of the group, but we could have also not even got out of the group. If we lost to Ireland, we wouldn't get out, right? So depending on the Australia-Canada result and our result, like we could have gone from being knocked out altogether, or we could get in and win it, the group, or we could finish in second. So what they did on that third game is they had both games played at the same time. So we got to have radio connections to the other game to know what's going on.
Is that how they do?
Yeah.
I've always wondered. So there's literally someone just on the bench that has it in the whole time.
Sometimes
Okay.
you see them on their phone.
Yes. Yeah, we got headsets, so we're talking to our people up in the stands, and our people in the stands are letting us know what's going on in the other game. So we really we played.
You were making adjustments not only for your game, but also relative to the other game that was being played.
Absolutely. So that game was going on, and it was tied for a time being. So we needed to make sure we at least got a tie to get in. So it was one of those that were, you're doing the math and figuring out the points and knowing the bracket, trying to figure out, okay, if they tie, what happens? If they win, what happens? And if Canada, so there were so many scenarios that could play out. So we went into the game and we still kept a relatively conservative approach. Although, even though we stayed in our block and stayed defensive, we played the block higher up the pitch, maybe 35 yards out instead of top of the circle, because we felt like we didn't have to drop as deep. They didn't have that kind of pace up front. And we felt like we could win the ball and maybe, now you've only got 20 or 30 yards to go to get to goal instead of, 50 yards to go to get to goal. So we played the block a little higher. But we dodged a bullet really early. McCabe got a shot that just went wide. And really, I think, out of memory, I think that was really their best good chance. We had a really good chance in the first half with Oshola that missed one just wide. And in the second half, we go in tied, and the other game was still tied up. So we needed to get at least a point. So it's one of those, as a coach, you got to go, do I just go for it? Because if we win the group.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about it regardless.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter in the other game. But then there's the other side to go.
Debate.
There's the other side is if you're sitting on the bench and you're going, you got a whole country behind you.
Yeah. Just
everybody's watching and don't blow
Yeah.
it. You're exactly right. Because you go, if I go for it and just put it all out and we lose, they get a lucky goal off a counter, then we're going, people are going to go, why did you go for it? All you needed is a point,
Right.
So we took the conservative approach. And then about 20 minutes of the second half, we really played really well. About 20 minutes of the second half, and we were all over them. We hit the post a couple of times. And then we found out late in the game, I think with about 15 minutes left, that Australia had scored. So now we're going, great, let's still wait because the goal differential may come into play. Next thing you know, we needed it to be a 2-goal differential, before it didn't matter the result of our game. And then late in the game, they scored a second, and then we got word, and we go, okay, well, let's go for it. So now we're trying to push players forward. The hard part is in a stadium of 40,000 people, it's hard to get
Communicate.
without making substitutions. It's hard to communicate and get that out. And then as it ended up, I think Australia ended up winning like 4-0, So the result of our game at that point then didn't even matter. Even if we would have lost, we would have got in. But it wasn't until late in the game that they broke it open. So it was, there's a lot going on the bench.
Tournaments like that, it's interesting because the first part is like a mini season in itself.
Yeah.
And so, yes, you have to prepare, set your team up to win one game, but there's almost time to make up for mistakes here and there throughout those 3 games. Like, just kind of bringing it back to the first game you mentioned against Canada, they figured out how to break you down by, switching it from center back to center back, beating that first line of pressure so that the center back would advance and create the numbers going forward in the middle.
Right.
So you got to deal with that by having the 10 step up, pick up the center back at the line. Right. And the 6 would push up. And everyone would slide. So that was an adjustment you had to make there. Second, third game, you made certain adjustments. Seemed like it kind of went how you expected and didn't necessarily have to tweak things too much in the game. Yeah. But all that tied together now, it goes into knockouts. And it's one game. You got to win it. Everything goes out the window. You can't be married to a specific idea. You just have to actually see how to win this one game.
That's right. Yeah.
So tell us about that game.
Yeah, well, now all of a sudden we find ourselves, like I said, we'd played the gold medalists and we'd played the host nation and we played Ireland. And now all of a sudden we get somebody like the European champions, right? England were the European champions. So it was what I did when I watched the video of the game. I watched, I had seen England in all of their games, in the group play. But once we knew that's who we were getting, then I really started to break and study them before that match. And one of the things I noticed is they had played China in the last group game, and China played in a very low block, and it was very, as you would expect from an Asian country, they were very disciplined in their block, right? That's the one thing that they're known for is their discipline. And England just shredded them with their possession and just played around their block. Now, the one thing we debated about was they shredded China because of the athleticism of the English players were also superior to the Chinese players. And we thought how much of that shredding the block was because of mobility and agility and, strength and quickness and that kind of thing, which we have more than China, or was it just they play so often against teams that play in a low block because England's usually better than who they play. Yeah. They just took it to pieces. Mm. So when I watched the game, I thought, between Millie Bright in the back and their other two center backs, and they had Kira Walsh that plays as a holding mid who's at Barcelona is a fantastic player, and their other holding midfield players. So their back three, they'd been playing a 4-back in their first 2 games, and they'd struggled to get wins. They really weren't playing like England should have played. So China, they played a 3-5-2. So everything in that build-up against China came from the 3 backs and their 2 holding mids. Now, they're very good up front, and they were good out wide with Bronze and Daly. And Lauren James, that plays for Chelsea, kind of played the attacking mid, so underneath her 2 strikers, and she was fabulous against China, scored a couple of goals. Very, very good player. Reece James's sister from Chelsea. Is so you look at it as a coach and you say, you do it one of 2 ways. You look at it and you say, how do we deal with the front line and their offensive power, right? So that's one way to approach the game. Or you look at it and say, can we eliminate the front line getting the service? Is there something we can do to say, don't let them have the ball as much instead of trying to solve it once they get the ball? So I made the conscious decision to say, you know what? They're going to expect us to play in a block and play low like we have. It's a winner take all.
Let's go after it.
Yeah,
let's go
for it.
So we're going to press our 3 forwards, going to press their 3 backs, not give them time to dilly-dally around and pick out whatever pass they want. And then we said, let's eliminate with our 2 attacking mids. You're locked onto their 2 holding, so they can't play through them. So now if they were going to play, they were going to have to play long to their to James and their 2 strikers. And athletically, we could deal with that, right? So that was the game plan. And then I decided to man mark with our player, Halimatu Allende. I said, you man mark James and just frustrate her. Everywhere she goes, you're there, right? And which is very old school because hardly any teams man mark anymore, right? So even though we were pressing their back 3 and their holding mids, we were still kind of, still playing that a little bit zonally. But when it comes in, you're in your zone, you're pressing it, right? But with Holly, we said, man marker.
Did you want your front 3 to show them a certain way, or what was the idea there?
We would try. So if we could get the ball out to say the right center back, then we would try to get it squeezed and pushed over in a way that we could keep them coming down that flank, right? And then what we did with our 4 backs is we said the outside back just step up on the wide midfield player on that side. So if they came out their right side, our left back would step on to, Daly, which was their right midfield player, and deal with her. And then our 3 backs would deal with their 2 forwards. And then Halimatu was eliminating James by man marking her. So we said we should still always have a numerical advantage. Yeah. And so it worked to a T because right from the kickoff, we were on the front foot. And honestly, at the end of the game, I think we outshot them like 20-12, in the game. And we hit the post twice in the game, or maybe even 3 times. First 15 minutes or so, our left back gets forward and hits the crossbar, bounds around. We come back, second chance at it. She has to make us a diving save to keep it from going in. Like we were all over them, and they just weren't ready for it, right? They have good players, but they just weren't ready for us playing them that way. And luckily, we stayed on the front foot the whole game, and I think arguably most people could look at that objectively and say, on the day, Nigeria were the better team. Now, a couple of things that happened in the game that we had to deal with as they grew back into the game a little bit is when we would go press on their 3 backs and their 2 holding mids, normally where the outside mids would be pushed higher in attack, to get closer to the front line to give them wingers. They started bringing Bronze and Daly back much deeper, closer to the back three. So our only concern became then, if we're asking our outside back to go, that's 20 or 30 yards. They've got to go and leave the back line to go step on that player. So we really had to try to make some adjustments on that on the fly, because what was happening is as they would come out of their half, our outside back may be having to go 30 yards into their half to pick up the outside mid, and it just created a lot of gaps. So kind of on the fly, we had to get the message out. Had to get the message out to them is deep in their half, just let them have it.
Okay.
Right? And let's not disjoin our back four so much. But as they start to get closer to midfield, then we can start to, I use the word roll up to step onto them. And still had to do that, because if you're locking every other option, you don't want those two outside mids to get it free and be able to make the game. So luckily, our two outside players really read the game well and didn't get caught very often, out of position with them. And Bronze and Daly really weren't as much of a factor as they normally are. And we eliminated basically Rousseau and Hemp up front. They didn't have much of the game like they had been having, because they couldn't get service the way they wanted. And as it went late in the game, James got to a point where we were marking her so much, she started leaving the forward line and going deeper into midfield and then deeper into the half to pick up the ball because she wasn't involved. And that's perfect. We want her to go in. We want her to go into their half and get it, get away from our backs and go deep. And again, that was the game that late in the game she got frustrated and stomped on the back of
that was the one. Okay, I was going to ask about that.
And got ejected. So this is where things really got interesting, because it changed. As soon as she got ejected, we were worse. And you think you're a man up, you're going to be better.
It's like those moments you talked about.
It was one of those moments, and we actually
time was left at this point.
We had about 10 minutes left in regulation, and then we potentially had 30 more minutes, which we did have because it went to penalties.
Mm-hmm.
So we had 40 minutes to get something out of it with the man advantage, and we didn't, and failed to do so, and really failed to create anything really, really dangerous out of it. And this is where our lack of preparation, not having the 5-week camp,
you never got to run that scenario.
We never got to have it. Now, we had classroom sessions where we talked about man up, man down, goal down late in the game. How do we adjust? And you talk through scenarios, but we never had time to train the actual scenario. So what happened is we'd been playing so many games off the counter. Then when we got the man advantage, we didn't know what to do. We just kept playing long, and we switched to a 3-back. And, played 5 so we could keep the ball and get the ball wide, get service into the box. And, that was the mindset. And it never happened because we'd win it. And then we'd try to go direct early and give it away. And they adjusted now they went into a block. They went into a 4-4-1 block, just sitting in deep. And we just didn't do a good job of handling the man up advantage, and of course now we lose in penalty kicks. So this is where lack of things that I've always tried to tell our federation is like this is why it becomes so important that you have proper preparation. Like 5 weeks of camp, we would have gone over every potential scenario, and our players would have been prepared for that.
For sure.
And it's one thing, as you guys know, is when you were playing for Butch, sitting in a classroom listening to it, it's quite different than going on the field and actually having a chance
100%.
to work on it. And some players that's listening to it, you might pick it up. You might not quite understand it, but you're not going to ask the question, and you just kind of go with it as he's talking. So you don't really.
Every player learns.
Every player learns
different.
different.
You got to show them in all those ways.
You show them on a board, you show them in video, and then you do it on the field, and you actually walk this, because some are visual, some need to actually do it, and so it really in the long run, I almost wish he hadn't have got ejected and we could kept playing 11 against 11.
Yeah.
Because we would have played our game,
That's what makes the game so exciting.
But
it's so unpredictable, and it sounds like you set your team up the right way. You got your tactics right. The game played out how you wanted it to. Everything was going the right way. The goals just wouldn't go.
Yeah.
And you end up going to penalties where anything can happen.
Anything can happen.
So I was just going to expand on that by asking you, there is obviously a reflection process that you go through as a coach, and that's important. Is there anything that you think you would have done differently in that game?
Yeah, I think at the end of the game, when we got ready to a point, and I made some changes once we went a man up, getting into the extra time. I probably, reflecting on it, I put in one of our players that has historically been a goal scoring player for us and played in 2 or 3 World Cups. And she wasn't playing as many minutes, but she was kind of like, she's that player you'll see every weekend in the Premier League game that's kind of almost on their way out, but they're still good enough that
keep scoring goals.
They could score a goal in the right kind of moment. And I thought she could get us this goal. And listen, I'm not blaming anything on her by any means because she's been great for us. But I probably had a couple of younger players that I went back and I go, second thought I'd have gone with one of them.
Yeah.
Because she really didn't do much for us. And she actually took her first penalty and missed. Mm-hmm. And interesting enough, when we're in this circle huddled up before penalties, the last thing she says to the group is, just get it on frame. Right, just get your penalty on frame. And what does she do? Steps up one, missed the whole goal. Yeah, missed the target. So I would have done that. And then our second selection was a back. And her penalties, she made, practice 6 or 7 days in advance. You're practicing penalties every day, that kind of thing. And she's always making them. But all she was a power player. She's not a finesse.
Yeah.
So she just runs up and smacks it. And it's just too hard. And unless it's too close to the keeper, it's just too hard to save. And I'm always leery of that because I never know where the ball's going to go, but she was one, we were documenting all of our penalty takers and she was right there in your 5. If you picked your 5 best based on what we saw in training for 6 or 7 days prior. And when we got in there, it was kind of like, okay, let her take one. And of course she skies it over the crossbar. And I looked at that and I go, you know what? I should have put a player in that's more, and so there's a couple things you regret.
That's something that you can live with because you always have those battles with yourself, especially in that situation where those players, you haven't spent a whole lot of time with them. You haven't seen them in every kind of battle
exactly
that you could be in. Right. So, because you haven't seen them in all the possible situations, it's hard to know who would be the best for that specific one.
You're exactly right. And then all of this to me then goes, and it's a reflection back on us, our federation not letting us to prepare the way we needed to prepare. And, the ironic thing of it is that it was the best World Cup Nigeria has had. Now, they went deeper. They went one more round back in 99, but that's when there weren't as many teams in the World Cup, right? And but they had lost games in the group and they had just got through, right? Yeah. And so, but when you take a step back, I went from looking at it a week before we go to Australia and going, we could get crushed in these games. We literally could lose 4 or 5 goals against that
2 out of the 3
with our lack of preparation. To going from that thought to going, we actually in 90 minutes of play didn't lose a game.
Yeah.
We had 3 clean sheets. We beat we got points out of the gold medalists. You got
the most from that group.
Got the most. Yeah. Taking the European champions to penalty kicks is it was amazing what those players did and how they responded and how they bought into what we were trying to do. And so much credit goes to them. And Kyle Quigley, my assistant, he was great because it's always nice to have somebody you can really bounce ideas off of and you trust and you have the best interest. And, so a lot of things really fell in place for us, quite frankly. But I look at it and I feel like we deserve to have some things fall our way.
Yeah, definitely.
For the difficulties we faced leading up to it and the lack of support and, things that we had to really, we're looking at, in the 10 days, I'm looking in every other country had been at least 30 days before in
long training camps.
And playing. And when we got to Australia, all the other teams were playing other teams in the tournament as exhibitions before the tournament started. Germany's playing Zambia and everybody's playing each other. We got in that 10-day window, we got an exhibition game against a local semi-pro team. And that was it. And we won like 8-1 and they got a late penalty just probably the only time they crossed midfield, and it was just
the kind of work you want.
No, not at all.
We didn't get, it didn't challenge us, didn't answer any questions for us at all, So it's just, it's almost in some ways a miracle that we accomplished what we
You
did.
have to be satisfied
Yeah.
with the work that you did.
Yeah.
I'm very happy with it. And the irony of this, guys, to give you a little backstory, is the summer before the World Cup was our African Cup of Nations, our championship.
Right.
And in that tournament, that's how you qualify for the Olympics. And then, so our quarterfinal game against Cameroon and AFCON, we had to win that game to qualify for the Olympics. If not, that would automatically qualify us. If we would have lost that game, then we would have to do a play-in, later. And so we beat Cameroon and got in. So in the quarterfinals of AFCON, so we got in. Everybody's happy. Everybody's good. The very next game is the semifinals of AFCON. Now, keep in mind, Nigeria's won the African Cup of Nations, I think 9 or 10 times. They're completely dominant compared to the other African countries in this competition. So the expectation is that you're just winning. You show up and you win, right? And we all know that's not the way it is, because now Morocco's put a lot of money into their women's program. South Africa, for the last 4 or 5 years, has put a lot of money into their women's program. So other nations, African nations, are starting to get really invested in this. And so we're long story short, but we're playing Morocco in the semifinal in Morocco, packed stadium, 45,000 people. And we're in the match. We're in full control. We're 0-0 at half, but we're controlling the game. They're not, after the first 10 minutes where they had a couple of chances, we settled down, and the rest of the half was us, right? All we hadn't done is hadn't got our goal yet. We come out in the second half, and literally 5 minutes in the second half, Halimatu Ayinde went in with a tackle with one of their Moroccan players. And you know how you step on somebody's foot, so they're both going for the same ball, but she gets there a little bit late, steps on her foot, immediate red card.
Yep.
She's out of the game. We score a goal, a man down. We go up 1. They score a goal a few minutes later to tie it as we're a man down. Then 5 minutes within the first red card, Rashidat Ajabadi did the same thing. Stepped on a toe, immediate red card. Jeez. So now we have 35 minutes left in regulation, and we're 2 players down, and we're tied 1-1. And I'm trying to figure out very quickly, on the fly, you got to make change, you got to adjust and figure out what you're doing. And so my assistant at the time was Lauren Gregg, who had been working with me for a couple of years with Nigeria. And I tell Lauren, hey, go make this sub. So long story short, sub I made, the adjustments we made, it worked. We got through 30 more minutes. We got through 30 minutes of extra time. I don't know a men or women's team that I can think of in an international competition under that kind of pressure where you need to get something out of the game that lasted 60 minutes, 2 players down. I can't think of a game.
No, yeah,
I
it's so
can't think
long.
of a game.
Yeah.
And we got to penalties and we lost in penalties. But I walk away going, probably our best job coaching that we've done with them, and I'm feeling good. I tell you that only because at that time then, since we lost and we didn't win, then the press has turned on me. The Nigerian public has turned on me. Now the worst coach ever. I mean, I'm just getting obliterated in the media. And I always protected the federation. I never spoke out. There were a lot of things that went on, not to get into all of that with you now, but I'm telling you that just to go how quickly things changed from probably being the most hated man in Nigeria to now all of a sudden it's completely changed at the World Cup. The media's now behind you. You got to keep this guy. He should be coaching our men's team because the men's teams didn't make the World Cup. The public's behind. We wanted to go. I might consider it. Yeah, I may consider it. But everything completely changed, and it was all from the work we did in the World Cup. So that's probably what I'm most proud of. And, now I'll continue to take them through Olympic qualifyings. And if we're fortunate to qualify, then through the Olympics this summer and then be done with them, or wherever we don't qualify, be done, So that's kind of the next challenge. Take them as far as we can get.
Yeah.
And then we would have, if fate's in our hands and we get there, then we would have got to the World Cup and the Olympics in the same year. And it's been 3 or 4 Olympics since they've been, because they only take one team from Africa. So, hopefully we can do that.
Nice. So what are your cycles now? Do you have camps periodically or? Well,
what we'll do is we've had a couple of qualifiers already. And now in February, we'll have a 10-day window, FIFA window, that we'll go play Cameroon. Okay. We have to win that home and away leg. And if we do that, then most likely the next round we'd play South Africa, kind of based on who they're playing. I think they'll win.
Yeah.
And I think we have to beat South Africa to get in to the Olympics in a home and away. And that would be probably in April. So we'll either know we're still playing after February, or we're done because we're out of the Olympics. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Perfect.
It's so much that goes into the behind the scenes, especially on the women's side, that I think the men don't have to deal with as much. I think a lot of that, has been highlighted obviously with, the way that the U.S. team puts it out there and stands up for the rest of the world, really.
Right.
And I don't know if you saw the Netflix documentary that they put out recently.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. Yeah,
it's a good one. I would recommend it. But it showed a little bit more of that as well. I guess I wanted to, hear from you because you were there. You saw all the teams. Like, we all see that the gap is really closing or has closed up between the rest of the world and the U.S.
Yeah.
Resources are, starting to develop with other nations as well, which is helping us also.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on just where the U.S. team is at and how the game is going to continue to progress on the women's level?
Well, I think what we're seeing now in the last World Cup probably will be remembered more in that way, of where more of the emerging countries started to have success. The Philippines and South Africa and Morocco. First time World Cup for Morocco, and they get out of their group. And beat Germany, and so. So I think it shows that the world is, I almost hate to use the word catching up to us, because I almost think the U.S. should be more introspective, in my opinion, when they're evaluating their program, and not say what they're catching or what they're doing, like focusing on how we continue to be the best in the world, like analyze what we're doing right and wrong in the U.S., and
I think it's just the vibe that I get, like in interviews. It's almost like they're patting everyone on the back, like telling them good job, but not looking at themselves to see what they could be doing.
I think that's exactly what needs to be done. I hope Emma can make some of those changes for the U.S. team now. I think she's a good hire for us for that reason. But I hear that all the time. The world's catching up. Well, what's happening is they're just now starting to make more investment. I tell you, when we went to Morocco to play, we trained in their national training center for their national teams. And I'm telling you guys, it's better than any U.S. facility we have for our national teams. It's better than, the only place I haven't been is St. James Park in England. I haven't seen that national training center, but it's better than
everything else out there.
Anything I've seen. And it's amazing. And as an African nation, I'm looking at it and I'm trying to talk to our federation and going, here's our national training center, and we have some fields that are dirt and not, and this is where our national team's trained. This is what they're doing. This is the investment. If we're going to stay on top, don't just think because we've always been there, we're always going to stay there. We got to, the hard part with some of these emerging nations is the ones that are catching up and that are doing better jobs now, Spain, the Netherlands, all those teams that over the last couple of cycles are just getting better and better and better. They're investing in it, right? And that's where I think it takes nations like, especially some of the African nations and some of the Caribbean nations, things, you've really got to have people at the top that understand, let's don't operate based on the here and now, but let's put a plan in place that's going to get us into the 2031 World Cup. Let's don't, like, if we don't get in 2027, that don't be a fault. And what happens is, when I coached Trinidad and Tobago, it was the same. Or even here at Nigeria, they don't think about the World Cup till it's the year 6 months or the year of the World Cup. Now all of a sudden, it's a World Cup year, so let's go. And then hope we do what we've always been able to do. Instead of going, you know what, we're not going to be good enough right now to win a World Cup. We have to be realistic and understand that. But we've probably got a 12, 13-year-old player playing that 2 World Cups from now, we can win it with that group. So you have to have a vision to go, what do we have to put in place to develop the next generation of players to come in? And then hope you do well in between. but not put all of your marbles in. And that would be the thing with Trinidad is they wouldn't put any money into it. Teams wouldn't train year round. They wouldn't have competitions year round. And then as you get closer to the World Cup, okay, now we'll start having camps and now we'll start. And it just doesn't work that way because teams like the U.S. and Germany and France, they're playing year round. They're investing. The players are getting paid and they're doing it year round. And the rest of us, in the countries that we're coaching it's just kind of year to year. They don't have that vision to see it, farther. So I think with the U.S., going back to your original question, I think the look is people are worried that the rest of the world is catching up to the U.S. Well, the rest of the world is getting better in women's football. It may be that the U.S. is kind of staying where we've been always, but just everybody else is kind of putting more investment in now. So now then what the step is, then how do we take the next step then? How do we get even better to stay above that competition? And to me, it starts with reevaluating and reassessing our youth, the way our youth soccer is structured and set up. Is ECNL and GA the best avenues for our youth players to be playing? Is there different pathways or something we got to do differently to take more management control over our youth system? Because right now the youth system is independent of U.S. soccer. U.S. soccer doesn't govern what they do. In other countries, they do govern it. It's too much money made in club soccer now. Yeah, the different, whether it's MLS Next or whatever it is, there's too much money being made to collectively come together and say, how do we structure something that's for the betterment for player development model instead of just worrying about what you have and what you have with your clubs or your teams? So I think all of that has to be inspected and looked at. I think the way we select our national team players right now on the women's side, I don't know how they're doing it with the men's, but right now everything's done through kind of a scouting system. They just hire a network of scouts. And to be honest with you, a lot of the scouts, no offense, but aren't successful, highly qualified soccer people that have a history of seeing things at the highest level, seeing the qualities. And then how much input are they having with our national team coaching staff to go, I want you to look for this kind of player. Don't find me necessarily the best player. Find me the best player that can play in this system, in this structure. So I just think it's not only about our senior team. I think it's about everything below it and building.
And I mean, I think that's why, when you look at Spain right now, coming off their 2 wins, it's seems like that whole team has been together for the most part since those U14s all the way through.
And you go look, all their youth teams are playing the same way. Yeah. You look at our under 20s and our U17s, it's playing a system or a game model the way that coach of that age group wants to play. It doesn't necessarily follow what
and the way the players can play.
Exactly.
So that's one thing. I think it's interesting that you say that because even in the documentary, there's lots of interviews with players and they say a lot. To me, it's actually a little bit surprising how much they kind of indirectly throw Vlatko under the bus.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of the comments they make are, just with the way things were, the energy was different. We just show up and we train and then we come to the games and we just play, you know? We just play. Yeah. And it's like, okay, yeah, but also you have to play a certain way and you have to do that together. And especially when you're playing against teams that are at or above your level, you know?
Right.
And so he obviously was attempting to implement some kind of tactics in the team.
Right.
And it seemed like the players just could not comprehend it.
Yeah.
Right?
Not at all.
And that to me seemed like it was more coming from the more veteran players.
Yeah.
But to your point, with the youth players coming up, I think that there are actually a lot of really quality, women's players that are younger coming up. For example, there's a player from Dallas who's breaking into the national team.
Jade Shaw. I know Jade since she was 12 years old, and she would have been called in much earlier if I were coaching. Yeah.
Because also she understands the game.
That's right.
She understands movement, space, how to control the tempo. And that's what you don't see in a lot of those players. Just one speed, go.
Yeah.
And you can't just do that.
Yeah.
Not right.
I think it's anybody that thinks we don't have the talent to continue to win World Cups is wrong. We have the talent. To your point, there's a great young generation of coming up that should be in. I think the other thing that changed a little bit that people in this day and age don't want to really talk about, but I think one thing that's changed too is from the 99 team that won the World Cup up till now, the players just like society, have changed because now all of them are getting their own brand. They're out branding on social media. They're doing TV commercials. They're things that Mia Hamm didn't have at the time, or Julie Fowley, it wasn't there.
Right.
So they're out doing grunt work and shaking hands and promoting the game just to get a league started.
Yeah.
These players have it, and it's handed to them, and they got more power and more control. And I think what happens is, I think those players themselves, I've heard them putting blame on Vlatko too, and there's probably always a little bit of it, both sides, that maybe there's things he could have done better or not. I don't know. We weren't there. But I think players also have to take some
like
responsibility.
a couple of those games, he definitely could have made some.
I think
100%.
substitutions and things caught him, and whether it was the moments were too
definitely
big.
not backing him, but I felt that.
I agree.
Like you said, it could
I
go
agree.
both ways.
I think so. But I think the players also have to take some responsibility. And I think this more recent squad that we had at this World Cup and even the last World Cup is sometimes I felt like they were more worried about their brand or their political statements or trying to represent a cause instead of going, wait, you're a football player.
Yeah.
Just come in and focus on doing your
because
job.
if you win it, then you can do that
You
stuff
can do
later.
that. Then you're going to get the marketability and you're going to do those things. And I think our team has gotten away from what's really made us special with the first generation of players that have been our national team players. So there's a little bit of that going on too. I think Emma can rein some of that in. I think she'll have a much more firm fist on things. And I think, I mean, at the end of the day, it's still a player's game. And at the end of the day, we had people that we've run across the convention asking, Kyle is here, my assistant with me, and asking us, well, you want to play in this block, and it's a lot of you have to want to run a lot in 90 minutes and not have the ball. And of course, in my mind, I'm going, you don't understand the block because you're really running less.
You're running all over the field.
You're running less. If you're stretched out, you're running all over the field chasing the ball. But if you're in this block, you run less, and that's just part of the purpose. But at any rate, telling them and talking about that a little bit, I think it's a little bit of a lack of just understanding, of what you're trying to accomplish. But the questions would come, well, yeah, we can do that, but what if it's your star player doesn't want to do it? And it's an easy solution. Don't play the player.
Exactly.
Put somebody on the field that's going to do the work. I mean, that's the bottom line. And that's the end of the day. That's the biggest motivating factor, isn't it? I'm going to set you out then, and then all of a sudden you either go, okay, I don't like it here. You put the work in. So at the end of the day, as a coach, I think sometimes we get caught up in whether it's youth soccer or whatever. Think about your training set, and I don't mean you guys individually, but in general, think about our training sessions with our youth teams, for example. Your best players, you actually, if you evaluate who you're coaching, a lot of time you're coaching your better players.
Right.
The ones that need it are not your better player, more, right? The other ones are self-motivated and they're doing the things, right? And so you need the bottom half that you're really spending a lot of time coaching them to make them better, to get their confidence up. But I think a lot of times we're now in a generation that we're afraid to get a player to do what is asked of them and hold them accountable for it, right? It's almost like, well, but she scores goals for me. Well, okay. But if she's not doing the job for you when you really need it, exactly, then what you're doing is letting her get away with something you're not letting the rest of the team get away with. So park her rear end on the bench and she'll change, So I think for me, that's the motivating factor. At the end of the day, you still have that ability to go, you're not getting the job done, so you're not playing today, And so I think we got to, as coaches, we're still the coach, so we still can't worry about what parents are saying or what my bosses at the federation are like. My job is to go get results, especially at a World Cup level. Doing it in college is a little bit different, but I'm still know that I'm going to get fired if I don't get results with my college team eventually, maybe not as quick, but it's going to happen. So at the end of the day, you got to look at it in a way that my job is to make them better. And by me letting any player get away with something that they shouldn't be getting away with on the field because they're not willing to put the work in to do it, is then I'm not doing that. I'm not coaching that player.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to get reeled in a little bit and woken up a little bit,
They got to earn that too.
Yeah.
They got to earn your attention and, you get what you deserve.
Well, to the rest of the players, to your point with Vlatko and some of the decisions and lack of substitutions in some of the games, those players that sit on the bench are wondering why.
Yeah.
Because he didn't make the changes, right? So they're wondering why, like, I can go in and do this job and she's not getting it done. So you have to think big picture of not just the players that are playing, but keeping your reserve players engaged. And again, that for me is not a criticism of Vlatko. I know him very well. He's a good friend. I think he does a really good job as a coach. I think sometimes it just doesn't work. You know, I've been in a coaching environment in Houston that just didn't work. After a few years, it wasn't working, right? And it was time for me to move on. It wasn't a matter of he's not a good coach. He just wasn't working there. I didn't have, for whatever reasons, whether it's resources and support of general managers or presidents, or I just wasn't doing a good job of coaching that team. You look at it and you look at all the top Premier League coaches, they've bounced from, how many times has Mourinho been fired?
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
I mean, that's just part of it. So when you're coaching at that level, you're going to move.
What is it?
Sure.
I think there's a quote. He saw Lampard or something in a bar or a restaurant one time after he had just gotten sacked from Chelsea. He's like, congratulations, you're finally a real manager.
That's it. And you're right. You until you've been fired, you're not a manager. You have to go through that. And sometimes the environment, and maybe that's what it was with Vlatko. Maybe it was just, for whatever reason, the players that he had and the timing, maybe the chemistry. None of us know what was going on behind the scenes with the team and the chemistry of the team. So maybe it just was a no-win situation at that point. You know, but I do think, you know, you got to be in it. I tell you, it's easy to sit back and be critical. We all do it. I sit on I'm a big Man U fan. I sit on my chair every weekend and I go, what is he doing? Why is he playing Rashford? He's doing no work defensively, you know, and yet I'm not there every day, you know, I'm not coaching that team. And so we're all guilty of it. It's easy from afar, but I tell you, you learn so much getting into it. It's just little things people don't think about. But as a college coach or a club coach or whatever, when you're playing, even on the biggest stage, I can always get information. Even if I'm playing in front of 6,000, 7,000 people with my college team, I can get information in easy to my players from the sideline. You can't do that at the international level. If there's 40,000, 50,000 people, there's no chance your players are going to hear you. So these are little things you don't think about, but you're going like, how do I get this message in to my team to get to everybody else? And even if I can pull a player close to come over and tell that player something, she still has to get the message to the other, 10 players. In there. And it's not, these things aren't easy, and they all can affect, outcomes of games.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, you're right. I mean, and I think maybe even fans of Nigeria or people that just watched all the games and watched them closely have their own opinion about, the way things took place and about your performance as a coach, but you providing us these insights in your preparation, thought process, adjustments that you made, obviously paints things a lot more clearly. And until people really understand that side of it, you can't make those judgments.
Yeah, no, you can't. I learned real fast when I started coaching the Dash. And then obviously, with Nigeria in particular, you just stick to your job, keep your focused on what you can control. And you almost get to a point where you just don't read media and you don't read stories, and you just almost have to kind of stay out of that, because if you're not strong in your convictions and things, you can
gotta be convicted.
You can get changed, going, God, everybody thinks I should be doing this, or everybody thinks, like, you have to just go like, I'm still, this is the way we need to play. I know it's the right way, and I got to do it this way. And
you got to remember what got you there.
To be strong.
You just turn into a sheep if you start following the opinions, and that's where you lose your uniqueness as a coach. Like, the only coaches you remember are the ones that have some sort of unique personality or way of doing things.
Exactly.
So again, thank you. Really appreciate you sitting down with us. We went longer than expected, but it felt like
time flew by. It felt like we've only been on 10 minutes. Nice. So
it was really good. That was the first time we've had like a proper, full-on tactical discussion, which I thoroughly enjoyed. So this was very fun for me, and it was a pleasure meeting you in person.
You too.
Looking forward to building this relationship going forward.
You bet. I'll be happy to help you anytime. Thanks for having me on. And of course, I love hearing your story of being players, and now you're doing this, and you're coaching, and you're doing everything to continue improving the game in the States. And, it's kind of like, as an older coach now, it's it's good to see young coaches like yourself get out and you really giving back to the game that provided you guys so much, and that's what we need. So I always feel good that we're in good hands when we meet people like you. So thank you so much for having me. You bet. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, sir.
I appreciate that. That was fantastic.